Okay, so I'm joined today by Inga and Mark. So, hi Inga, hi Mark.
Hi.
So, as some of you probably know, Inga is one of our teachers in the Sound Healing Academy. She teaches based in and around London and the Southwest in Glastonbury in the UK, and she's has been through our level one, level two training, both for working one to one with clients and with groups. But she also has a long background with music and sounds and singing and vocal work, dating back a long time, long part of her life. And we can talk more about that in a couple of minutes. So, we're really grateful that Inga is part of our team, and Mark is also part of our team. Some of you probably know Mark as well. He's our kind of IT audio visual guru, you could say, and has been involved in helping to shape the Sound Healing Academy on the IT side in many significant ways over the past few years. And together they have recently produced a new album and have formed a duet as a band called Täyu, and produced this album called Incantation. And so it's a great pleasure to be with you today to kind of explore what it is that lies behind incantation and how you see it being helpful for people when they listen to it. So Inga, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background with singing, in fact, because I know that a large part of your style is what's been called, I think, improvised non-lyrical vocals, which is
Yeah.
quite different from obviously singing based on vocal lyrics. So how did that come about?
Mm. Well, yes, I've been doing this sort of improvised style, I guess, for a long time. Even in my childhood, from when I was around 10, my mum was in a religious, or joined a religious sort of cult, and I would sing and help lead this group of people of maybe 300 people in this singing in tongues, which felt, yeah, it was a beautiful thing to do and a beautiful discovery as a kid and for everyone. I mean, this basically is just allowing. Uh, it feels like you're really connected to spirit, and that it's just flowing through you, and you're totally in this euphoric sort of space. So that was a really lovely discovery from that young age. And I also did some jazz studies at university, and so I was just taking that a step further. And I also studied yoik singing, which is the Lapland sort of area, Scandinavian, part of Scandinavia. Their singing style, which is basically invoking a feeling of place or person, and actually channeling that through the voice, through basically like little repetitive motifs.
Mm.
And so it's really sort of conjuring and feeling, yeah, people, place, animals, whatever. And it's a very, it's shamanically based.
Mm-hmm.
So the story is, I think the shaman would go into this sort of trance-like state. A bee apparently would fly up the nose of the shaman, and they'd be knocked out cold for a few days,
Uh-huh.
while a group of people would yoik around the shaman, while the shaman would journey, through water, land, whatever, and come back with the messages. So that's where this yoik sort of style came from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Right. And clearly when I listen to the album, I can kind of hear those influences coming through, and it is beautiful, beautiful sounds that you've created there with your voice. Thank you for that. And so Mark, you've got a long background of guitar work, essentially, having been in various bands and things in your youth, but more recently having kind of gone more solo in a way, and have produced a number of albums, mainly featuring recently the acoustic guitar, particularly Spanish guitar. And you use that a lot on this album, but not exclusively, because there is some electric guitar work as well, I think, isn't there?
Yes, that's right. I've been for the last probably 20 years or so. I've been mostly playing Spanish guitar in as a solo artist. But on this album, in the last year or sort of 18 months or so, I've been recently getting back into electric guitar, which I used to play in bands of 20, 25, 30 years ago. So I've been kind of rediscovering that in this album as well, but in a quite different way to what I used to do. It's very different to doing 70s and 80s rock covers.
Yeah.
So there's it's a nice different variety of instruments in this album to what I normally do.
Yeah. No, you've got a great variety of sounds there. It's a really wonderful album, and it hasn't taken you too long to produce. Is that right? To bring it together, and how did it start?
It's very quick. I mean, when I did my last solo album, it took me about 3 years to finish. Whereas this one, we've got done, finished, and out there in like 6 months, which is amazingly effective working and speed. So we kind of started work on it, I think, middle of November last year, after we'd been in Glastonbury for a week doing a sound healing course together. And we were just going to do one track initially, which was turns out to be Shores of Atlantis. So we just had a little play around. I just thought I'd write something very different to what I normally write, in that my compositions as a solo artist are normally quite kind of preconceived, and there's lots of melodies, and there'll be like a verse and a chorus and all that sort of thing. Whereas this was very different in terms of just letting the music flow and seeing what direction it takes you in, and being more kind of organic, So it was not very much all about melody. It's all about kind of emotions and flow, and got a more spiritual element to it, definitely.
Yeah, great.
So we just did one track, and we thought, hey, this is we could be onto something here. Should we do another one? And then it kind of went from there.
Yeah, great. It's a good way to go, isn't it? Yeah. And of course, we're recording this now at the beginning of June 2020 in the UK here. We're all in the UK, and we've been in this kind of lockdown for just over 2 months roughly, and so a lot of this work you've done during this lockdown. So it's not as if you've been together, in a recording studio getting this done, is it? It's how have you done it?
Yeah, I mean, I've done recorded all my parts here in my studio, which you can see the mics and the setup over there. Inga's also great to work with, because she's got a great knowledge and understanding of getting really good recordings, and she's got like a really nice mic and setup in her place up north of London. And her friend Melissa recorded her violin and viola parts in France, so you can kind of work all around the world to bring things together.
So you're all in your home studios essentially, recording your own sounds and then mixing it, and you've done the mixing and mastering, I think, haven't you, Mark? So that's great. So it shows really what can be done even in these kind of lockdown times, and just it's a wonderful production. So it's great. It's very inspiring. It's very creative. And Inga, you've talking about creativity, I know that you're currently studying a PhD, is that right, to do with music? And
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's that all about?
So the PhD is about the creative muse. So it's this. Well, basically, I've been interviewing a lot of songwriters and composers about where they feel their inspiration comes from, and if they feel it's coming from a part of them, or if they actually feel like it is coming perhaps from an outer source. So it's been really interesting. I actually interviewed Mark as part of this as well.
Okay.
So I've interviewed maybe nearly 40
Wow.
different songwriters and composers. So I'm getting a lot of different answers, but some of them there's quite a few that are saying it's sort of like they feel that it's a prayer, and that something is coming through them, but it's coming through their filter. So it has some of them in it, but it is filtered through them. And
And how do you think it is for you personally?
Look, for me, I always see it as a prayer. I usually ask for help beforehand, ancestors, guides, all that want to come in and help me, please do. And I also go through periods where it's not the right time to compose, and that's sort of like this gathering, even if I don't realize perhaps that I am doing that, and then the tap will come on, and that's something I can't really control.
Yeah, right.
I can sort of push through, but that can be quite difficult. It would be nice to have the tap on all the time.
Well, yeah, but then the bathtub might overflow a bit, you know. So.
Well, this is it. That's right.
Yeah.
The whole
Well, it
house.
sounds as though the tap was on pretty much these last few months when you were working on this album together.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
flowing.
I think the inspiration we got from each other and all the students, and that time we had in Glastonbury was kind of really set something off, you know, set the wheels in motion for that.
What were you doing in Glastonbury?
Inga was teaching a level 2 groups sound healing course, and I was doing the video filming and audio recording of it.
Yeah. Okay, so it was in that group context where you were, you know, really getting the inspiration for this potentially. Yeah, fantastic. That's really good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to play a bit of a sample from one of the tracks on the album. And so I thought that we could play a sample from the track Gaia, because this has some wonderful footage, doesn't it, Mark, from of nature?
Yes, nature filmed, obviously not in the last few months, but filmed in southeast Cornwall. There's a good friend of mine who lives 12 miles away, who's an ex-BBC wildlife cameraman, and he very kindly offered to do a video for this. Upon hearing it, he said, "Oh, I love this, so would you like me to do a video for it?" So I said, "Oh, yes, please." And this is what happened.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's a great example of how the images that he's captured there complement the sounds that you've created, and appropriately it's called Gaia, which is really the nature of life on this planet, we could say. And so that's it's a wonderful expression of that, both musically and visually. So here it goes. Okay, so that was the track Gaia, and there are many other tracks on the album. So do you want to just talk a little bit about how, the themes that are there on this album, and what's significant perhaps from a healing perspective as well?
Yeah, so we based it loosely on the elements. Well, it wasn't that loose, I guess. We tried to bring it more and more into the elements as they started developing, and we did that by adding some soundscapes, say for the water element, say of some ocean, for Gaia, then bringing in insects and frogs and all sorts of things like this. For breath, we brought in some sound of just the wind in the trees, and Melissa Cox, who played the violin, sort of made these lovely sounds that were very breath, sort of like very spirit-like. Yeah, so, and we were, yeah, just with the album and how we set up each track, like, from listening to as a journey, we brought in the fire element first with the track called Incantation. And it's probably the most lively, fiery, sparky sort of track. And we did that for a few reasons. I mean, one being it's always good to have a nice track at the beginning of your album that sort of, captures some attention and what have you. But also with sound healing, we do practice this thing of when you meet someone at the door or something, you match their energy. And more often than not these days, people are more in the fight or flight, or a little bit more energized anyway, aren't they, rather than coming to you and being really in that lovely deep relaxed state. So we sort of saw this whole sort of arc of the album of the fire, and then bringing it down and down more and more relaxed, and then leaving you there so you can roll into bed or whatever it is.
Yeah, in a deeply relaxed kind of state at the end. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, that's great. And Mark, I know you mentioned to me earlier that there are also some other themes going on musically there that seem to be appropriate in relation to healing and sound healing in particular. I know you've used some different tunings on the album. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. In terms of the tunings, the first track we actually wrote for the album, which is the last one in terms of order on the album, probably because it's one of the most relaxing ones and takes you off to a different kind of state, really. Great for listening to. You start off really energized, and by the end of it, you're really mellow and relaxed. And so that's Shores of Atlantis, which, as I said, was the first one we wrote. And what kind of started off the ball rolling for that one was I'd been out one evening down by the sea, which is near where I live, and I'd got myself, for Glastonbury, for the workshop, funnily enough, I'd actually got myself a little Zoom portable recorder, and I'd taken it down to the sea one evening when it was, not very windy, but the sea was like lapping against the rocks, and there was nobody around. So I got this really nice recording of the sea for about 10 minutes, just doing its thing, and that's what started off Shores of Atlantis, really. And I remember I've done a lot of research and reading into different tunings. And one theory is that the tuning of A being at 432 hertz, that's a tuning that's more aligned with the sounds of nature. That's a theory many people have. So I thought, based on that theory, that seeing the sea was going to be a dominant sound throughout it, then maybe let's try doing a 432 hertz tuning for this particular music, so that all the instruments and the vocals resonate more closely with the sound of the sea. That was my plan for that. And that's seeing we didn't involve any, I did all the music for it and Inga did the singing. So it's a lot easier to, if you're getting an orchestra involved or lots of different musicians, it can be a little bit tricky to get them to tune differently. But so I just tuned all my guitars that I used to 432 hertz. And I also had a kind of intuitive vision that, as well as guitar, it needed something a little bit different in this, which was Native American Indian flute. So I did lots of research on the internet and to try and find one that was tuned, and the song is in the key of C because it's about the sea, water. So I had to find a Native American Indian flute that was tuned to C at 432 hertz, which I amazingly managed to source. So I got one of those. It came over from America, and I never actually played one before. But it just kind of, on this track, it kind of showed me how to play it, if that makes sense. So I just intuitively guessed what to do, and it kind of works.
Fantastic.
And Inga's vocals are just fantastic. It really takes you off to some magical, mystical place.
I mean, your vocals are really amazing on that track, but also on all the others, Inga. There is some. It is like actually like another instrument, isn't it? Really, in that sense, and the fact that there's no lyrics as such just enhances that whole quality of spaciousness that's there with the sound of your voice and the different elements that you can create with that. It is remarkable. So, how easy did you find it to work with these different tunings? Was it a conscious thing, or did you just kind of go with it?
I think, well, Mark had told me about that first one, but and actually interested. Now, Mark, did I go back through that one?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting, because I thought afterwards, wow, some of those notes a little bit out of key. So there might be something in me that's so used to, doing things in the normal key that I just had to, because it's just a fraction difference.
Yes, it's like about between 20 and 30% lower than one note, but not as far down as a semitone lower.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I put up a video, little clip from Shores of Atlantis on my Facebook page the other day, and somebody actually commented. They actually said, did you actually record this whole track in 432, or did you retune it afterwards? And I said, yeah, we recorded it all in 432. And his reply was, wow, I'm so impressed that Myriad is able to sing in 432. That's amazing.
That's kind of odd, though, in a way, isn't it? It's like, well, we should be able to sort of just twist our ear a little bit and a tune. But
I've also done research in this as well, and what I know is that the original bel canto type of singing that was very popular in Italy, in particular, in a few centuries ago, they actually sang with A as 432 because they found that the actual register shifts from one register to another happen more easily and create less strain on the vocal mechanism of singers when the A is set at 432 rather than any other pitch. So in a way, it might actually be a really easier and more flowing way to work with the voice. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's
amazing. It was interesting because the guitar parts for that particular track, most of them are done on a fretless Spanish guitar, which is a normal Spanish guitar with all the frets removed, so the neck is just completely smooth. So it's very difficult to play because you have to guess where to put your fingers, like you would on a violin, basically. And I've not really done much with it at all before, not really played it before. So perhaps that was a good thing, because seeing it was in 432, I wasn't used to finding notes in a certain place. So perhaps that was a good thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so in just a minute, we'll have another little break with another clip from the album, from actually this track we've been talking about, Shores of Atlantis. So Mark, how did this recording, because you did the video on this, I think, as well, didn't you? What happened there?
Yes, that was I was just inspired on Tuesday morning. I love kayaking, and I was looking at the forecast, and I thought, Tuesday, this is going to be an amazing day for kayaking. All the conditions are perfect. The sun is shining. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's low tide at 9 a.m. and wind is less than 4 miles an hour. And for kayaking, that is just an absolute dream. So I thought, I'll go out on my kayak and I'll take a few recording devices with me. So I've got a little Osmo Action, which is similar to a GoPro, and I've got a little Panasonic. So I took a few of these along, and it was just absolutely magical for getting inspirational video footage. With the Osmo, you can put it underwater and you can just drift along in the kayak and capture these amazing magical places underwater. And with the sort of slow movement of the kayak through the water, it's got a nice kind of magical flow to it. And what it was capturing under there that day was just, I've never seen anything quite as good as that. So I got home, had a look at the footage, and I thought, this is going to be perfect with a sea theme for Shores of Atlantis. So let's just put together a few little clips and a bit of music, and the two go really well together.
Yeah, they really do. It's a fantastic combination. So here it is. And so what about other sort of sound healing related musical elements are there in the album?
Well, since working with the Sound Healing Academy for quite a few years, I've obviously learned a lot from workshops and videos. And another thing that I've used in the first track and the last track, so it gives you a little bit of a repeating theme of familiarity, is triads. And so there's lots of different healing triads. You can delve deeper and find out a lot more about them online and on the courses we do. But it's basically 3 notes that have different healing properties. And on both Incantation and Shores of Atlantis, I use this quite a lot. And there'll be like 3 sets of triads that start off a little bit kind of dissonant, which is quite good for releasing. And the next one will be slightly less dissonant, and the next one will be more harmonious. So it's kind of like releasing the stuck energy and bringing in more harmony as the track progresses.
Seems to work really well. And I think when we were talking earlier, Inga, you mentioned that another kind of element of that, which is kind of what we do in sound healing more generally, is just that sense of repetition. So is that right? So how does that work on the album?
Yeah, well, I guess, with songwriting, you can get quite fancy. Or pop, I guess, can be quite repetitive too, but it has other elements that make it not so relaxing. But, we used little chord patterns and then repeated them and rhythms, and then just gradually bringing in other instruments too. So, there's a real sort of flow and, and I think it does take you into that lovely state, that relaxation state, just through the repetitive nature of the rhythm and the chord, and nothing too surprising unless we did use that as an element of like, oh, okay, yeah, let's go to this more minor sort of area perhaps. So you've also got these aspects of the major and minor, which we talk about too with the triads of, the major is sort of like, okay, bringing it out into the world, and the internalizing of the minor and all of the internal work. So there's all of these sorts of things that play there as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, and was one of the tracks also recorded in the scale, in the key of 5/8 as well? Was there?
Yes, we both Inga thought it was a good idea for us both to have a very, very short solo track as what I call a musical spiritual aperitif between the longer tracks. And so she did a solo track with just her voice, and I did one with just the guitar. And this particular piece, which I called Ahimsa, I decided to record with tuning to 528 hertz, which is supposed to be the frequency of love. So I thought that would be an appropriate one to use.
Yeah. And what's Ahimsa? Is that a
Ahimsa? I believe that's an ancient Sanskrit word which means do no harm.
Oh, great. Okay, so the love element in a way kind of corresponds to that.
Exactly.
Really well. Oh, that's so good, so good. And just coming back to what you said at the beginning, it's the whole nature of this album really is one of kind of taking you on a journey, isn't it? Of a kind of journey through the elements, and therefore in a way is it that the kind of the idea being that we as humans, but also life on this planet generally, is composed of these 5 main elements, and that's the nature of our being on that elemental level. And what you're doing with the album is in a sense is activating or nourishing each of those elements so that it's a journey of wholeness ultimately. I guess is what we're taking on through this album. And that's a wonderful outcome. So we end up in a place of feeling whole, of feeling relaxed, of feeling nourished and more complete and in touch with the essence of who we truly are, I guess. That's certainly my experience of it. And I think it's I found this to be a truly wonderful, not only musically, but also in terms of the healing effects that it has. And I really encourage you as the listener to this to check it out. And I think what I'm going to do is we'll have a link underneath this video where you can go and see the page that Mark has built on this on his website. Remember that the group or the band name is Täyu, and so it's a page on Täyu, and it's got all the links to where you can download, stream, and hear all the albums as well as the tracks and so on for this wonderful album called Incantation, which is also the title of the first track. This kind of fiery number that grabs your attention at the beginning.
Yeah, and a quick shout out to my friend Dave, who played the didgeridoo on that track.
Ah, okay. So we've got a didgeridoo on it as well.
Yeah,
great.
As well as Enchanted Forest, which is the Earth type track, which
Fantastic.
Didgeridoo and Earth, it goes well together.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And didgeridoo is another instrument that is fantastic in terms of sound healing as well. It's really, really wonderful.
Absolutely, it's one of the original sound healing instruments. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. The native Aboriginal people in Australia, of course, is where it comes from. And Inga, you come from Australia initially, so maybe
right.
You're kind of influenced by that in some way too, and the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was nice to have that real earthy. It's also very shamanic too, isn't it? And they're very much in the dream time and traveling and journeying with the didgeridoo too. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you, Inga, or Myriad, as you're called in Täyu, and Mahhrk, as you're called on the album as well. It's been a real pleasure talking with you today, and I do encourage you, everyone, to check this out and to listen to it and to share as widely as possible, because it deserves wide attention, I think, this music, this album. And so please enjoy as well at the same time. Thanks again. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.